It was supposed to be just another night. Nothing special. Nothing to remember. I hadn't even wanted to go out in the first place. My friends had dragged me out, insisting that I needed to stop being so antisocial, that a few drinks and some loud music would do me good. I wasn't convinced. The idea of a packed bar, of sweaty bodies pressed together under neon lights, of small talk that never led anywhere, it exhausted me before it even began. But I went anyway. And that was the first mistake. Miami was alive that night. The streets pulsed with energy, a restless heat clinging to the air, wrapping around my skin like a second layer. The club we ended up in was packed, the kind of place where time dissolved, where you could step inside and suddenly find yourself lost in a blur of music and movement, of flashing lights and the intoxicating scent of liquor and perfume. The bass vibrated through the floors, through my chest, through every muscle in my body. The air smelled like salt and citrus and the lingering bite of tequila, and for a moment, I almost let myself relax. Almost convinced myself that maybe my friends were right, that maybe a night out could be exactly what I needed. And then I saw her. Sienna. She stood by the bar, completely unbothered by the chaos around her. There was something about her, the way she held herself, the way she existed in that space like she owned it. She wasn't trying to be noticed, and yet, I couldn't take my eyes off of her. Her hair, a shade of deep auburn, spilled over her shoulders in loose waves, catching the neon lights in a way that made it glow like fire. A tight black dress clung to her frame, hugging every curve with a confidence that felt effortless, like she didn't even have to try. She stirred the ice in her drink absently, her long fingers tapping against the rim of the glass, her gaze drifting over the crowd like she was watching a movie she had already seen before. She had the kind of presence that didn't just blend in, it commanded attention without asking for it. She looked dangerous. And I was already in trouble. I should have turned away. I should have ignored whatever magnetic force was pulling me toward her, should have focused on the music, on my friends, on anything but her. But then she looked at me, and it was over. Her gaze locked onto mine across the crowded bar, and for a second, the world tilted. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Just a slow, deliberate sweep of her eyes as she took me in, as if she were assessing me, as if she already knew exactly how this night was going to end. My stomach tightened. My throat went dry. I didn't believe in love at first sight. But whatever this was, this pull, this gravity, this undeniable need to know her, felt just as dangerous. She smirked, just the faintest tug at the corner of her mouth. Like she knew, like she had already won. And that was how it began. I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment I got lost in her. Maybe it was when she smirked after my terrible joke, the way her lips curled just slightly before she took a slow sip of her drink, her eyes never leaving mine. Or maybe it was when she leaned in, closer than necessary, her fingers tracing idle circles on the rim of her glass as she confessed, with a lazy smile, that she hated tequila but drank it anyway, because it was tradition, because it reminded her of reckless nights and bad decisions she never regretted. Or maybe it was that first moment of silence between us. That split second where neither of us spoke, where the world around us seemed to pause, where the space between us was charged with something neither of us dared to name. That moment when our eyes locked just a second too long, and we both knew exactly where this night was going to end. And yet, neither of us moved, like we were daring the other to break first. By the time we left the bar, it was already too late. The neon lights flickered above us, painting the pavement in shades of pink and blue, casting shadows that stretched with every step we took. The warm Miami air wrapped around us, thick and electric, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was her, the heat radiating off her skin, the way her fingers ghosted over my wrist when she reached for my hand, not quite touching, but close enough to make my breath hitch. We didn't talk much on the way back to my apartment. We didn't need to. The tension was already thick enough to choke on, already building into something neither of us had any intention of stopping. And when we finally stepped inside, when the door clicked shut behind us, when the silence of the apartment wrapped around us like a second skin, Sienna moved first. Her hands were on me before I could think, before I could breathe, before I could even pretend to resist. fingers curling into the fabric of my dress, pulling me in like she had been waiting for this all night. Her lips crashed against mine, urgent, demanding, and suddenly, there was no more space between us. There was only heat, only the press of her body against mine, the way her hands slid down my spine, the way she devoured me like she had been starving for this. I had been with women before. I had had nights like this before. The kind that burned hot and fast, that left you breathless and dizzy, that ended with tangled sheets and the inevitable fade into something forgettable. But Sienna was different. She touched me like she already knew what I wanted before I did. Like she had spent years mapping out every inch of my skin, learning every reaction, memorizing every sound. Her hands were deliberate, slow when I expected fast, teasing when I needed more, always one step ahead of me, unraveling me piece by piece until I was nothing but sensation and need. She didn't rush. She took her time, drawing out every second, pushing me to the edge over and over again until I was nothing but a mess beneath her hands. And when I finally came apart, when my nails dug into her shoulders and my body trembled beneath her touch, she whispered my name like she was claiming something. Like she knew, even before I did, that I wouldn't be the same after this. Morning came too soon. The first thing I felt was warmth, the lingering heat of her body beside mine, the scent of her still woven into the sheets. For a moment, I didn't move. I just breathed her in. The room was dim, the early sunlight spilling through the blinds, casting soft golden lines across the bed. I blinked against the light, turning onto my side, and there she was, Sienna, still tangled in my sheets, one arm draped lazily over her stomach, her red hair spilling across my pillow. She looked different now, softer, quieter, stripped of the sharp edges she carried the night before. And God, she was beautiful.
Something tightened in my chest.
I ignored it, because this was supposed to be casual. This was supposed to be nothing. And yet, as I lay there, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of the night before settle into my bones, I knew. I knew I was already in way too deep. The plan was simple. One night. That's all it was supposed to be. No lingering looks, no second guesses, no complications. Just a night to get lost in someone, to surrender to the pull of something fleeting and walk away before it had the chance to become anything more. I had done it before. I knew how to let go. So when I woke up to an empty bed and the scent of her still clinging to my sheets, I told myself it was for the best. I told myself it was exactly how these things were supposed to go, fast, easy, forgettable. And then came the first message. Hey, stranger. Still dreaming about me? I had been half asleep when my phone buzzed, the screen casting a dim glow against the dark room. I blinked at the text, my brain still foggy with sleep, my body still aching in places I didn't want to think about. And then I laughed, because of course she would be the one to text first. I rolled onto my back, staring at the message, debating whether to respond. The smart thing to do would be to ignore it, to let the night stay in the past where it belonged. Instead, I sent back a single eye roll emoji. I figured that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The text didn't stop. Not in an overwhelming way. Not in a needy way. But in a way that felt deliberate, like she knew exactly how to keep me on the hook without pulling too hard. Some days it was simple. A teasing remark. A memory from the night we spent together, thrown into conversation, so casually it almost felt harmless. Other times, it was more than that. What's something you've never told anyone? That was the text that made my stomach tighten, that made me stare at my phone longer than I should have, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. And then, before I even realized it, we were talking every day. It wasn't just about flirting anymore. It wasn't just about reminiscing about that night or pretending we weren't both thinking about doing it again.
It was deeper than that.
Personal. She asked about things no one else did. She made me want to tell her things I usually kept to myself. And then we saw each other again. And again. And again. Until the lines blurred so much, I didn't even know where the game ended, and something real began. The first time she showed up at my door again, I told myself it was a mistake. The second time, I told myself it was just closure. By the third time, I stopped making excuses. Sienna became a habit I couldn't break. A presence in my life that I didn't know how to say no to. We would meet up without really planning it, finding excuses to be in the same place at the same time. I started looking for her in rooms before I even realized I was doing it. Started expecting her. Wanting her. I should have known it wasn't just casual fun anymore. Not when I found myself memorizing the way she smelled, the way she laughed, the way she always traced the rim of her glass with her fingertip when she was lost in thought. Not when I found myself reaching for my phone in the middle of the night, half expecting a message from her. Not when I started noticing things about her that had nothing to do with sex. The way she hummed to herself when she was focused, the way she always bit her lip when she was holding back a laugh. Not when sleeping with her felt less like a conquest and more like an inevitability. Not when I realized that I didn't want her to leave anymore. It was late when it happened. We were in bed, bodies tangled together beneath the sheets, her breath warm against my neck, my fingers lazily playing with hers. It should have been easy. We had done this before, touched without thinking, kissed without meaning, left before it could matter. But this time felt different. I could feel it in the silence. Sienna's fingers tightened around mine, just slightly, and I felt it, a hesitation, a pause that wasn't there before. And then she said it. "This isn't just a fling to you anymore, is it?" Her voice was quiet, low, but it cut through me like a blade. I froze. I could have laughed. I could have lied. I could have said something witty, something dismissive, something that would keep everything light and simple and safe. But then I looked at her, and I knew I wouldn't be able to lie to her. Not about this. Not anymore. Because, for the first time in my life, something that had started as nothing was pulling me into something I didn't know how to navigate. And I had no idea what to do about it. I should have been afraid. Fear had always been my first instinct, a survival mechanism, a reflex, a shield. When things got too real, too complicated, I knew exactly what to do. I left first. I walked away before anyone else had the chance to. That was how I had always kept control. That was how I had made sure nothing ever got close enough to break me. But with Sienna, I wasn't afraid. I was free. And I had never felt that before. Sienna wasn't just another story. She wasn't just a wild night in Miami, wasn't just a fleeting moment meant to be lost to time. She wasn't a name I'd forget or a body I'd only remember in pieces. The way her hands felt, the taste of her skin, the breathless sound of my name on her lips. She was more than that. She was a force, a storm that tore through me without warning, without apology, without mercy. She didn't just touch my body. She wrecked my walls, shattered my defenses, destroyed the carefully constructed lines I had spent years convincing myself I wouldn't cross. And the worst part? I let her. No, I wanted her to. I had spent weeks pretending it didn't mean anything, ignoring the way my chest tightened every time she looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered, dismissing the way my body knew her touch like it had been waiting for her all along, convincing myself that this was just habit, just comfort, just something I could walk away from if I really wanted to. But the truth was I had never wanted to. And now, as she stood in front of me, the city lights painting soft gold across her skin, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Not when she looked at me like she already knew everything I was about to say. Not when she stepped closer, closing the space between us, her fingers grazing my wrist before sliding up my arm, slow and deliberate, like she was giving me a chance to stop her. Not when she finally cupped my face in her hands, her thumbs brushing gently over my cheekbones, her touch light but grounding. Not when she smiled at me like that, like she had just won, like she had always known how this would end. Like she had been waiting for me to catch up. "Stop fighting it," she murmured. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it, laced with something that scared me more than anything else had before. Not lust. Not desire. Something real. I swallowed, my throat dry, my pulse hammering beneath my skin. "I don't know how," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Her smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew. "You don't have to." And then she kissed me. Not like before. Not like the heated, desperate moments we had shared in the dark. Not like all the nights we had spent tangled in sheets, tangled in each other, pretending none of it mattered. This kiss was different.
Slower. Deeper.
Unrushed. Like she was giving me time to understand what this was, to accept it, to stop running from it. And as I kissed her back, as I let my hands slide up her arms, as I felt her smile against my lips, I realized there was no turning back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want there to be.